Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Thank you, Megan. Just making sure everything is ready here. Okay. So today we're going to talk about creative and data. And I'm actually really excited about this because so many people seem to be interested in this topic. We got over 2,800 people to sign up to this webinar, which is really very cool. So I'm excited that you guys are excited about this topic. We're going to be talking about what kind of creative drives the best ad performance based on analyses of millions of ads on our network. Okay. So I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Rachel Zalta. I head up research and insights. I have an MA in social psychology with a focus on persuasion psychology and online behavior. I've been at Taboola for quite a while, over 3.5 years. What I do here is I study online behavior based on the data gathered from billions of recommendations worldwide. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and to mention me on Twitter and to use the hashtag Taboola Talks. So I actually wanted to start with a poll where I was going to ask a question. Megan, do you want to pull it up? Okay, so we have a few questions in this webinar. The first question is, how many brand messages do you think you see in one day? So we have 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, or over 10,000. So what do you guys think? How many brand messages are you exposed to?
We're going to give everyone 10 more seconds to respond. Okay, it looks like 5% of you responded between 1 and 10, 30% responded between 10 and 100, 37% responded between 100 and 1,000, 20% 1,000 to 10,000, and 8% 10,000 or more. 100 to 1,000 certainly came in as the winner.
Okay, nice. So originally, that's what I thought too. I was actually thinking between 10 to 100 originally, and then when I thought about it a little bit more, I'm like, okay, it's probably above 100. But according to the American Marketing Association, we are actually exposed to 10,000 brand messages in one day. And when I saw this number, I was first taken by surprise. I'm like, 10,000 brand messages in one day? And I started calculating it, and we are only awake for around 1,000 minutes in one day, meaning in every given moment, we are exposed to 10 different brand messages at least. So it made me like take a second and look around and be like, which brand messages am I being exposed to now? And when I look at it from the marketer perspective, it really brings up a huge challenge that we have now as marketers and as brands, that we want consumers to engage with our ad. And 10,000 brand messages in one day, what that means is that there's a lot of competition out there. And it really highlights the importance of using the right creatives. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before I talk about the creatives, I do want to take a step back. And I want to talk a little bit about the context, or the importance of the context. So when we think about our ad, the first thing we're going to ask ourselves is where is our ad going to appear? And that mindset that the consumer is in is going to be crucial for also the success of our campaign, but also for the question of which creative should we use. So the creative recommendations are actually going to change by the context. And I'm going to mention that a little bit during my presentation. But let's jump to the creatives. So if I asked you what kind of images are going to work better, an image with a person or an image without a person, what would you all say? So we have poll number 2 now. Okay, so person versus no person. The options are person, no person, or it depends.
We're going to give you guys 10 seconds to respond.
So here, think about it from the consumer perspective. What do you prefer clicking on? What attracts your attention? Also from the marketer perspective, what do you usually use in your image? Do you have a person or you don't have a person?
Okay, 65% of you responded with a person, 4% without a person, and 32% were unsure, saying it depends.
Okay, awesome. So most of you said that having an image of a person works better. And that's what we recommend as well. So we say that in general, pictures of people are going to get more attention and more engagement. And there are a lot of different theories that kind of explain why this happens. I like to talk about this one story. So if I was in this room right now, and there was a lion in this room, who would survive, me or the lion? So obviously the lion would survive. But what happens if I meet a friend and then we meet another friend and we create a community of people? What we're able to do at that point is we're able to build defenses against this lion or against other dangerous things. So part of what helped humans survive is their social ties. And according to some survival theorists, humans aren't strong, but what actually allowed them to survive is those strong human ties that they had. So one of the things that based on or because of this survival instinct to always have those social ties, we're always looking for other humans. So when you walk into the office in the morning, the first thing you're going to do automatically without even noticing it is you're going to look for who else is there, what other people are here. And the same thing happens when you walk in or when you go to a web page. You're going to go to a web page and you're automatically going to look for people. So if we're thinking about those 10,000 brand messages in one day and you want to really be the brand that's going to stick out, use images with people. This in general works well. And then we have animal versus no animal. So which an image with an animal or an image without an animal? What usually works better? So of course, not every advertiser is able to use an animal in their image, right? So only if it works with your product are you able to do that. But if it does work with your product and you're able to add an animal, we found that images of animals work really well. And the reason why is because we are obsessed with everything cute. We enjoy looking at cute pictures of animals, of anything else. I know for me, at least, my Instagram feed is all like cute pictures of animals and National Geographic. Interestingly, studies show that the same areas of our brain that are activated when we eat chocolate or when we fall in love are activated when we look at cute pictures. So using cute pictures in your creative is going to be another thing that in general will attract a lot of attention. Another question that I get a lot is, should my creative be colorful or should it be black and white? Here, I want to hear from you guys first, what you think. So we have poll number 3. So again, here I want you to think about what you as a consumer usually click on, what you as a marketer usually choose for your creatives, what you've seen that worked well in the past.
Give you guys a few more seconds to respond. So it looks like 4% of people think black and white, 77% think color, and 20% think that it depends.
Okay, nice. Okay, so so most of you think color, and when people ask me this, the answer is actually not as clear as I'd hope. In the past, I did hope that the answer was, yeah, it should just be colorful. But that's not exactly what we found. So there are a lot of theories that say that certain colors are linked to different emotions. So there are theories that say that green is happy and red is angry and blue is sad. If blue is sad, that would be a pretty big problem for a lot of the brands these days, right? But studies actually show that colors are not inherently linked to emotions. There are also different theories that say that certain colors are linked to attention, right? So some people say that red, it brings about high attention, but that hasn't been proven either. So colors are not inherently linked to attention. So the question is, what kind of colors work? So according to studies, colors that are different than their surroundings are going to work. And so what we found in Taboola when we looked at black and white versus color is that black and white images were actually doing really, really well. We understood that because everything else on the web page was colorful, and suddenly one person was using black and white, it was different, it stood out, and it grabbed attention because of that. What actually has been happening in the last few months is that so many advertisers have been using black and white images that the trend is actually changing now. So we're seeing that black and white isn't as strong as it used to be. And then we have video versus image. So here you probably all know that video works really, really well. This is also related to survival. So if I was in the jungle and I was trying to survive and there was something moving in the side of my eye, how important would it be for me to detect that movement? It would be really important, right? Because that thing that's moving, that could be something dangerous. The thing that's moving could be food. So in order to survive, humans and animals as well have developed an instinct to look towards things that are moving. And that same instinct applies online as well. And eye tracking studies have found that videos are almost impossible to ignore. So when we're scrolling online as consumers and something is moving, we have to look at it. So a lot of marketers are using videos these days because of that. And all of these findings and all of these things, these things that we were just talking about, they really lead us to best practices. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen a lot of different variations of best practices. We have our own set of best practices. And best practices are great. They're great, especially if you're a starting advertiser and you're trying to figure out what usually tends to work. But sometimes best practices are just not enough. They're not enough when you're an advertiser that is trying to expand to a new country and you're trying to understand what are the best practices for that country. Shouldn't the recommendations be different? Don't people behave differently depending on where they're from? The same thing with categories. So if you are trying to promote one specific product, should the best practices be similar if you're trying to promote that product or a different product? And if you're working on a mobile phone or on a computer, shouldn't the best practices be different for each one of those? Another thing that's really important here is the impact. So if I was an advertiser and I saw best practices and in the best practice it said to include a person in the image, but I know that from my perspective as an advertiser, it takes a lot of resources to start adding pictures of people into all of my images, all my creatives. I want to know what the impact is of that creative recommendation. I want to know that the impact is going to be really, really high, because if it's not so high, then it's probably not worth me investing in that. And then I guess I would say the most important thing is the time aspect, because best practices might be true in one point in time, but we're all consumers of the internet. We know that things are changing every second. So we need to understand what the best practices are for now, right? And what all of these realizations led us to do is to create an internal tool. And what this internal tool did is it gave us also the impact of each creative suggestion. So it told us the CTR increase for each one of the suggestions that we had. It also gave us the creative suggestions by country. So if we wanted to understand what the recommendation is for different countries, it analyzed the data for the country and told us what the best practices are. Same for different verticals or categories, and for different platforms, and also for different languages. And then I guess the coolest feature that we added to this tool was that we added a feature that allowed it to update every single week so that we understand what the best practices are now, not a few months ago. And then we decided to take this internal tool and open it to the rest of the world. And the tool lives on a website called trends.taboola.com. I have to say that as a psychologist, I love to spend time on this site just to look at like what's actually working right now. I specifically like to look at the differences between pictures of men or pictures of women in different countries. You'll see some really cool things there. But I spend a lot of time just seeing what's working now. Um, and there's a few points here that I just wanted to make before I move on, because I get a lot of questions about this. The data is analyzed on a weekly basis. So what we do is we take all of our creatives that ran on our network every single week, and on Sunday we refresh all the recommendations. The items have to have at least 25 clicks and 25,000 impressions. Altogether, every single week we analyze 75 million clicks and 50 billion impressions. So this is like real big data. The way we run the analysis is we take the average CTR of all the creatives with the characteristic and all the creatives without the characteristics, and then we look at the uplift. So if the uplift is 100%, then the highlighted characteristic got double the CTR. It was 100% more. And then the images that are displayed, so the images over here, they're just an image we chose. They're not the actual image that the brand is running. So those are a few points about the site. Another thing that we have, and that's really cool to look at, is the keyword trends. So in the keyword trends, we have a list of words that did really, really well in terms of CTR. Like here we have beautiful and looks and his. And then we have a list of words that isn't doing so well in terms of CTR. So these are words that we usually recommend using only if you have a pretty high CPC. But this is another fun thing to take a look at when you're putting together your title and you want to know what kind of data could help me put together the best potential title. Phrases is another cool thing to look at. So phrases is a combination of 3 consecutive keywords that appear in the beginning of your title. So here we see that this picture of and the real reason we're doing pretty well. And then we have video trends. This is a new part of the site that we were also really excited to make public. So what we did in the video trends is we looked also at the action types. So what are people doing in the video? So here we have driving, swimming, stretching, sitting, I think that's dancing, and sports. And then we also have video characteristics, which are like, should the video be black and white? Should it be colorful? Or should there be a person or an animal, etc.? I don't know how many of you guys are working with video, but I think another thing that's cool about this is that you can actually filter by KPI. So depending on what's important for you in this campaign, if it's viewability or if it's completion rate, you can look at the different creative suggestions by each one of those of those KPIs. And then we have topic trends. So topic trends are not based on clicks. They're based on page views. So the question here is, which topics are people reading the most about right now? So I took this screenshot during the New Year. So New Year was a really interesting topic then. And we have Trump and the NFL. So this is a great place to kind of look at if you're trying to figure out what's interesting to people right now. And then this is my favorite part of the presentation. And it's my favorite part because these are some cool findings. These are findings that we never would have uncovered if we wouldn't have looked at the data, if we wouldn't have looked at trends, basically. And we would have just followed the best practices as they were in a static PDF. We wouldn't know to give really specific recommendations. So let's look at these cool findings. So one of the findings, and this is one of the first things we noticed when we started running these analyses, are that the word surprising was trending for months. So many advertisers were using it, and it was doing so well until literally it was one day last year where it just stopped, and it never appeared in the high CTR list again. So that was a cool way to actually see the trend happening. The second one is that consumers of native ads, so here we're talking specifically about native ads. Again, I'm referring to the context as being an important part of the creative process. Consumers of native ads prefer images without text in general. But we noticed that for the business category, for the B2B category, we see that CTRs are actually up 20% when the image has text on it. In general, as you guys also said, images of people work really well. But we found when we looked at the data that in finance, images without people are actually doing better. And we saw that US consumers, they're looking or they're searching for more content with photos, for photo galleries. We see the word photo in headlines working really well with a CTR up 131%. And then black and white images, which we mentioned before, they're getting a lot of attention. But if you look at it by country, you'll see that there are certain countries like Mexico and Brazil where actually colorful images are really, really strong. And in general, we usually recommend close-up pictures. We saw that usually close-up pictures do better. But specifically for sports marketers, we noticed that when the picture was taken from a distance, it was doing much better. And then I have this one that I also really like, maybe because it is related to the psychology also. But if this was taken from the food category, so we looked at what was doing well within the food category, and we saw that images without food were doing better in food-related content. And it was kind of strange. In the beginning, we were like, is there something wrong with our data? Why would pictures without food do well in food? And then when we started digging in a little bit into the specific campaigns that this was based on, what we noticed was that advertisers that were using this strategy were actually using a mystery strategy. So they were talking about a specific food or a specific recipe in their title, and they didn't show the food in the image, which got a lot of consumers to be more interested and to click and then to engage with whatever was post-click as well. So that was a cool strategy, again, that we only saw when we looked at the data. And then we have poll number 4. This is actually the last one, so I won't bother you anymore with this. Okay, so pictures of men or pictures of women? What are people going to click on more? So I think you have 10 seconds. Don't go on trends.taboola.com yet. I want you to tell me from your common knowledge and experience what you think usually works. So we have men, women, or it depends.
Just giving you guys a few more seconds. Okay, it looks like 14% responded men, 57% responded women, and 28% responded it depends.
Okay, so I'm seeing that more and more people are saying it depends, which I'm very happy about, because it really does depend, and that's what the data and that's what trends is teaching us. So let's look at the results. So in May, we saw, this is a screenshot from May, and this is an analysis of all of our data across all categories. And here we found that women were getting a 25% increase in CTR, and that's what I was used to, and that's what that was what I thought would work anyways. In July, we saw still a trend towards images of women, so 15% CTR with images of women. In October, something weird happened. The CTR was pretty equal between men and women, and I was like, huh, what's happening here? This is interesting. In December, men were getting a little bit of a higher CTR. And then if you go on trends today, you'll see that men get 11% increase in CTR. So to me, this is really cool, because this kind of breaks all my conceptions about like men and women and what works and what doesn't work in advertising. And it also proves to me that like I need to be relying on data more and more when I make different recommendations and when I think about campaigns in general. And it also teaches me that I can't just look at the data once and then go away and do my creative stuff. I have to always keep tabs on the data. I always have to look back and see what's working now. Did the trend change yet, or is it still the same? So those are a few cool findings that I found. I'm sure that if you guys explore the site a little bit more and explore your data a little bit more, I'm sure you'll find some other really cool trends. What I want to do now is I want to demonstrate how marketers use trends. So I'm actually just going to go to the site. So it's trends.taboola.com. And I'm going to say that I am now a finance marketer. So as a finance marketer, if I was focusing on sponsored content, on like static images, not on video. So let's go on images, and I'm going to filter by finance. Now, if I wanted, I could also filter by platform, by language, and country. I usually like to start looking a little bit more broad and then getting a little bit more specific later. So let's look in general at finance and see what works. So I see that outdoor images are working better than indoor. In finance, that's interesting. I would usually imagine the image be taken indoor. So here, what I would usually take from this data is I would say, let's test a couple images that were taken outdoors. Men versus women. So here, men are getting an increase in CTR. I'd probably test more images of men, but I would always include one or two of women too to see if it works, if this trend is true specifically for my audience as well. Black and white is pretty strong here too. So I would do a bunch of black and white images and probably one or two colorful ones. I'd probably keep away from illustrations since they're not doing as well anyways here. And I see that no people are working better than people. So I would probably try a few images without any people. I'd probably keep away from animals. And I would probably try a couple of images with text, since I see that that has a higher CTR. Now, when I tell you I want to try a few images, that's a really important point here. When I talk to our top clients and I talk to them about different creatives, the first and most important thing, and I'm sure you guys have heard about it a lot too, is that testing is really crucial for the success of any creative campaign. So when you look at trends and you look at the data on what's working and what's not working, I wouldn't take this data and come up with one creative that fits the trend and then only test that. I would look at these creatives, these creative recommendations, and I would put together a bunch of different creatives based on this. And I would be testing all of those. We actually ran an analysis here to see how many creatives you should be putting in your campaign. And we found that the magic number was 9. So 9 creative variations in your campaign yielded the highest CTR. So that was kind of cool. Anyways, if I'm going back to that finance advertiser, if I was running a video, I'd probably look at some video trends, but I'm not running video. If I'm looking only at images and keywords, I'd be going to keywords. And here I would filter for finance. And then I would look at the high CTR words and the low CTR words. So for the high CTR words, we're seeing something cool here. First of all, we're seeing some interesting words that I might want to test in a few of my title variations. But I'm also seeing these, region capitalized and city capitalized. What those are DKIs, dynamic keyword insertions. So dynamic keyword insertions are cool because you put that little piece of code into your title and it actually changes depending on where your consumer is. So I'm right now in Tel Aviv, and if I had a city capitalized headline, then it would say Tel Aviv in my headline. It looks like DKIs are doing really well for finance, so that's definitely something I would test in a few of my title variations. And I'd probably keep away from these words as much as I can, the low CTR words. Okay, so I'll go back to the presentation. That's really what I have for you guys today. A few takeaways that I think are pretty important. So I definitely advise to know best practices. Best practices are really important as a first step. But you need to know that sometimes it is important to put them aside, especially if you're trying a new product or you're trying a new country and you want to refresh your creatives a little bit. In that case, using data is really important. And using data, especially to inspire creative tests, is really important. You want to consider what's trending in your country, your category, your platform, and your language. And you also want to remember that online trends are always changing. So keeping in touch with the data and the trends in any way that you can is really important for the success of your creatives and your campaigns in general. We actually have a subscription that you can subscribe to on the site, and then it sends you the trends automatically. So that's something that I've done because I've what happens is naturally is you rely on the trends that you've seen and then you forget to look back at the site. So this kind of reminds you, wait, things might have changed. Look at it again. See if it changed or if it's still the same. So that's what I have. We have a few minutes now for questions. Megan, I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, please, again, feel free to submit your questions in the GoToWebinar module. We have a few that have been coming in throughout the session that are really great. So first, Rachel, a couple people asked about the number of creatives that you suggest per campaign. Could you give a little more information on how many creatives you should have when you're setting up a new campaign and what's good for testing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we actually ran an analysis to kind of test this, and we found that the magic number was 9. But anything between, I would say, 6 to 10 is probably good. You want to make sure to have a variation. You want to have some, as we said, you want to have some with people, some without, men, women, and when you try to create all these variations, you naturally need like a larger number of items. So that's what I recommend.
Is there any way to search historical data on Taboola Trends, or is it always just the most recent week?
Yeah, so that's another good question. Right now, there is no way to search historical data, but we might consider adding that in the future.
When you're talking about a person, a couple of times in the webinar, we mentioned that images with people do better than those without. Is it also a graphic or a cartoon person, or is that not the same?
So that's another good question. We use a technology that reads the images and it tells us if there's a person or not a person in the image, and it doesn't include illustrations. So it actually looks only at not illustration images of people. So yeah, the answer is specifically real photos of people.
Okay. Do you see a cycle in trends where the best CTR tends to flip from one variable to another over time, like we mentioned with how it happens with men and women? Is that because audiences are becoming jaded to one, so they become more attracted to the other?
Yeah, so we're always seeing trends are always going up and down. Some of them are more stable and they don't change for a while, and some of them change pretty often. To be honest, the men or women one is a pretty recent thing. Like I've always seen consistently that images of women were doing better. So this is like, it was a pretty stable trend until pretty recently. There are some trends that are a little bit more inconsistent. So for example, when I look at like inside versus outside, that's one that I see that changes pretty often. So it really depends on which characteristic we're talking about, but they all change. Like I would never look at any of those recommendations or any of those trends and say that this is stable and this is never going to change. Like they always are changing. There's always a cycle.
When it comes to videos, have you seen black and white also doing well with videos?
I actually don't remember what trends, what there is in trends. I have seen specific video campaigns that have worked well in black and white, but I do not remember. Should we check trends? We could check it right now. You could go ahead to the next question if you want. Meanwhile. So it looks like black and white is doing better, yes, for video.
It's always better to check trends.
Yes. You want to look at the data and actually rely on that.
So in terms of keywords and phrases, we kind of talked about that a little bit. In general, what types of headlines perform best using those keywords and phrases?
So that's an interesting question. Like I hope I'm understanding this right. It's like besides the keywords and phrases, like what else is important? So what we've identified, and maybe we'll have another webinar about this, is that there are strategies in headlines that we've seen that work well. And it doesn't even matter what specific keyword you use, it's the general strategy that's working. So I'll give you like one example is like if you say according to the experts in your headline. Of course, it has to be really according to the experts. But if it is according to the experts, you should buy this next phone. It makes people trust that title more or that brand more. And we see more people engaging with that in the end of the day. And it doesn't even matter what kind of keywords. You don't have to actually say the words according to. You could substitute that with anything else, but that's like a kind of strategy beyond the word that works well. So we have a number of those that maybe we'll talk about in the next webinar.
Great. So what are some other tactics or things that I can do to test my landing pages with A/B testing using images and keywords?
Okay, so you're saying
I think I'm trying to get at, like, is there a strategy behind testing images and keywords at the same time? Should I do it at the same time? What recommendation do you have for the process?
Okay, yeah, so that's another good question. One of the things that you want to make sure is you want to make sure to test every single title with every single image. So you want to that's the only way to create a real A/B test, because if you just write 5 titles and you combine them with 5 random images and one of them does really well, you don't know if it did well because of the image or because of the title. And if you want to kind of be able to differentiate between the two, then you have to combine all 5 titles with all 5 images, meaning 25 items. So I wouldn't go that far, but I would definitely try variations of different images together with different titles.
Okay, and the last one we'll ask for today. Have you specifically seen questions and headlines working?
Yeah, that's another good question. So that's another trend that I've seen that goes up and down. It's actually not on trends, so we don't have the question mark as a keyword yet, but we might want to add that. Specifically, I've seen that there were certain times where questions were getting like really, really high CTRs, and then it kind of went down. Now I think it's kind of going up again. But yeah, it's kind of one of the things that goes up and down.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. We did see a lot of questions coming in that were campaign specific, and we will want you guys to know that we will address those as soon as we can. In the meantime, always you can reach out to your account manager or taboola.com/support if you need more immediate assistance. And as a final reminder, we will send everyone that signed up for this webinar the recording so you can reference this session later. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.